So the Republican Party of Florida has already decided who you're going to vote for this August for their candidate. Ready? It's Byron Donalds. Why? Because they have determined that there will be no debate because it is settled. Byron Donalds is going to run, and he's going to win governor of Florida. Welcome to the Gapfillers Podcast. My name is Michael Bradford. If you care to know about Florida politics, this is what the main focus of this podcast is for. We are going to be pushing out candidates or recognizing candidates that you may have never heard of. You may have never heard of Matt Thorwalder, who is running for the Ag Commissioner. You may never heard of Bobby Williams or Fishback for Governor of Florida. Now, these people don't have a lot of money. These candidates don't have a lot of money, but however, I don't believe money should determine who you vote for. I believe the right principles and the right and the right leadership is who you should vote for. Now, what other people have to say about that is up to them. But money in politics is abysmal to me, and the only reason money in politics works is because we allow it to work. We do not pay attention to the things that we need to unless they are pushed in front of us. So let's get into this. So the 10-10-10 rule is the way the Republican Party is getting around the debates that were scheduled for in July. All right, so the debates were, the 10-10-10 rule means that you must have 10% public polling, you must have 10% of elected officials, and you must have 10% of campaign fundraising. So you must have 10% of all of those in order to qualify for these debates. Now, Governor DeSantis, to his credit, even though he's remaining silent, which is probably wise, on which I actually admire, he's remaining quiet on who is going to be should be elected for the Republican Party primary for governor. And this is important because it allows me and allows you to decide who you want to vote for. Trump has already decided. You get to vote for, and the Republican Party of Florida has already decided. You're voting for Byron Donalds. Why? Because no debate, no even like consideration. You don't even get to consider even another establishment candidate like a Jay Collins. Why? Because it's a messy process, and they might get politically damaged. God forbid that they have to defend their record or defend their ideas, or even, for that matter, put ideas forward. So, unless they're for AI data centers and for the moving finance positions from New York to Florida, and then paving over more of Florida, that's what Byron Donalds is. That's what his policies are. The few that he has released are very they're not native Florida. He's pro getting rid of the property tax, but we're voting on that in November anyways. So, which we will get into in probably the next video. So, all right, so the 10-10-10 rule is the way that they're blocking out the other debates, because the only person that qualifies here is Byron Donalds. Now, why does this irritate me to no end? Because this is the same exact playbook that the Republicans and Trump was so up in arms about when Biden and Kamala Harris were running for president. They're deciding. They skipped the primary process. They decided Harris, even though you had RFK Jr. in there and you had a couple other candidates. Nobody else got name recognition because the Democrats decided who you were going to vote for president if you didn't like Trump, and that was Kamala Harris. Because Biden, everybody knew after that first debate that he wasn't going to make it. Now, Kamala Harris didn't either, but the problem is that now you don't have any debates, right? The Republicans in Florida are doing the same exact thing. Now, the Republicans say, specifically the party says that, well, he's just so far ahead, there's no other viable candidate. Well, Jeb Bush in 2015 was a front runner. You had Chris Christie and you had a bunch of other horrible candidates, Ted Cruz up there, which frankly, looking back, I supported. Oh my, regret that one. But all in all, they're trying to decide who. And until the debates, you didn't have a Trump. Trump was polling at like 2% before that first debate, and after that first debate is really when he took off to be the front runner. So anybody can go from 2% to 40% in a debate because you are comparing idea to idea, talking style to talking style, leadership to leadership. So you get to see, policy to policy. So you get to see, side by side, and that brings a lot of notoriety or a lot of eyeballs to that race. But the Republican Party thinks that's going to be messy. They've already decided Byron Donalds. That's why Trump got out so early and endorsed him, and that's why all these other candidates, these other like the county sheriffs and the other state candidates, in the House, State House, and stuff like that. That's why Rick Scott, they're all endorsing Byron Donalds because we want to skip this process because we want to focus on winning Florida. The problem is that you don't get any. This is a very common problem that happens when you get too. Okay, I'm going to use this word, conservative. I'm not talking about conservative ideas, not talking about conservative versus liberal. I'm talking specifically about the word conservative. You can't let you can't let a Trump in. You can't let an anti-establishment candidate in because what God forbid their ideas be better than ours. Well, then you have to deal with what Trump was to the Republican Party of 2015. Turns out he's pretty much the same as Bush. But there's no you're comparing apples to apples at that point, and you don't get to find an orange. You don't get to compare and contrast your candidates, so you don't get necessarily a strong candidate. You get cookie cutter. This is who we want. So you don't get a strong candidate, and if a candidate is going to mess up in a debate, you want it to be during a primary. Why? Because then you got 5 other candidates to choose from, or maybe even just one. But you at least have a set of candidates to choose from, as opposed to what happens if he messes up in front of David Jolly if they decide to debate. Well, if he decides to debate David Jolly and he messes up, well, then you're stuck with nobody. You're stuck with the guy that doesn't have any ideas because he was shoved down our throats. Not to mention he's from New York. Not to mention that he's pro-AI data center in your backyard. Not to mention more people moving to Florida. I don't know any native Floridian who wants to see more of East Orange paved over. Want more of the suburbs. You don't want or Tampa. You don't want the mega city that's going to stretch from Lakeland to Tampa to Orlando. You don't want to see the Everglades paved over. You don't want to see North Florida developed into retirement central with the villages ever expanding. Those are all for non-native Floridians. So, they can say they bring jobs, but they don't. They bring in more people to compete for those jobs, just as many jobs as they create. So all in all, this is a very bad move, and it strengthens my dislike of Byron Donalds even more because he won't debate. He won't show up for that CBS the debate that they're trying to host, and that's one of the ways we can get around it. You can tune into the CBS debate that goes around the state party. Now, Byron Donalds probably isn't going to attend because why should he? If 40% of your people of voters are undecided, that leaves a big enough room, theoretically, that people can decide to vote for another candidate. Now, that's one way. The other way is to contact your state and local party chapters in order to put pressure on the state party to get maybe they can even host a debate. I don't know. The problem is that the state party is now a good old boy network that can't allow an outside candidate in. And it's particularly because Trump endorsed. Trump for for what good he has done, he follows that up with just as bad pits in the primary process. So yes, his candidates do tend to be winning this year, but he's also picking the Lindsey Grahams of candidates. There's no sane person that I know that loves Lindsey Graham. Right? They tolerate him because they might support some of his ideas. Frankly, a lot of evangelicals support or pro-war, but still don't like a Lindsey Graham. They like a Ted Cruz or they like a Trump. But the problem is that they're all in the same establishment party now. They like to claim to be these outsiders, but in doing so, over the past decade, they are the establishment. There is very little difference in the political GOP, the national GOP, as there was during the Bush era. There's very little difference between the two, and there's very little difference between Bush and Trump. So thank you for joining me. Go ahead and like, subscribe, comment if there's a candidate you would like to highlight, whether it's a local race, whether it's a statewide race. Let me know in the comments. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you in the next video.